This reading is from the Basics, God, You, Jesus, Faith by Mike Novotny. This chapter is entitled You. Even if we have never met, I have a hunch you and I have the same problem. We're not good. I'd apologize for the quirky caps lock again, but I want you to know I'm not talking about good. You might very well be a good person, a relatively decent human compared to the drama queens at work and anger kings online. No, you're not perfect. But you do try to learn from your mistakes, grow in your character, and give more than you take. That's good, but it's not good. And good is what it takes to be with God. The Bible's logic is that God is so good that he cannot stand things that are bad. He loves people so much that his very nature cannot put up with evil, even a little evil sprinkled in here and there, or that one bad thing buried deep in your past. God knows how much one cruel word can hurt people, or how much a little anger can ruin a family, so he refuses to put up with it. He is holy, pure, unable to stand it when people he loves are not perfectly loved. That is one of the best parts about God's character. Can you imagine if he was cold when people were cruel to you? But it is also the scary part about him, because that means God has serious issues with parts of your character. He has serious issues with you. I'm not trying to judge you unfairly here. I feel the same way about my own life. You might, if I gave you the highlights, call me a good person. I read to my kids almost every night, take my wife on a date almost every week, and give strategically to the poor almost every month. That's good, right? But if I added the lowlights, you might reconsider your judgment. I often get moody about truly trivial things, am too inflexible and addicted to my schedule, and have an instinctive ability to think about what I want, when I want it, and how I want it done. That might be normal by human standards, but my normal still hurts people, and that's not good. Passages like these make me question just how close to good I actually am. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 3 and 4. Do not out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Helpful words. Not a hint of sexual immorality. Be grateful. Be humble. Prioritize others. I don't have to think back to my toddler or teenage years to remember the last time I didn't do the good things on that list. I'm guessing you could write your own version of this moral inventory. Remember both the noble moments of the past and the days, words, choices you wish you could undo. In fact, since this is so spiritually important, grab your pen again and finish writing the following sentences. People might consider me a good person because but people might change their minds if they knew that. Was it hard to write those last words? I wonder if you hesitated, thinking through who might pick up this book and read your confession. Perhaps you chose the PG-13 version of your past, editing out the R-rated moments that you are ashamed to put into print. You and I have the same problem. We do some good and perhaps are mostly good, but we are not entirely good. We are not good to an extent that makes us enough to be in the presence of God. There is an obvious difference between good at bar league softball and good enough for Major League Baseball. A clear line between karaoke good and record label good. We all know that in some crowds you have to be more than good, and that is absolutely true for God. By his standards, no one is all that good. No one is worthy to stand and soak in his glory. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans chapter 3, verse 23. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. Is God's standard high? The highest. We would expect nothing less from someone who cares so much about love that he claims to be love itself. So how is it even possible to reach that standard? How can people like us become good? About a year ago, a pastor told me about the answer that many elderly people gave to that question. As he stopped by local nursing homes, he frequently asked, "If you died today, do you think you'd be good enough to be with God? Are you confident that you would go to heaven?" Almost always, their gray-haired heads would nod. So the pastor followed up, "How do you know?" One confident woman replied, "I went to church all these years and paid my dues." I mean, no offense to one of my elders, but that is an extremely offensive answer. Can you imagine her saying to all the people she hurt in her life, "I might have yelled at you, taken you for granted, argued with you, ignored you, and tried to manipulate you, but I went to church all those years"? No. Spending an hour in church does not a good person make. While you might shake your head at this woman's beliefs, please note that most of us think something similar. We think we're probably going to go to a better place because we fill in something good and didn't fill in something really bad. We convince ourselves that our good should be good enough, or we compare our goodness to other people, specifically the really bad people, and tell ourselves that God must be happy with us and mad at them. But that's only possible if God is God, if God isn't good, but just relatively good. So what? Okay, so what? So you and I are not good like we should be. We're human. We fall short. We don't always love the way God wants us to. What's the big deal with being human? The big deal is that we are in serious danger of being separated from God. That is what sin does. Sin is the simple word the Bible uses to describe our thoughts, words, and actions, or lack of actions, that don't line up with what the God of love wants. Whenever we replace love with sin, it separates people. Like two repelling magnets, sin pushes us apart so that the person who was once right here ends up over there. You have experienced this, right? Your dad was overbearing and verbally abusive. Maybe he self-medicated his loneliness with a six-pack of Paps and took out his unsatisfied soul on you. And what did his sin do? Made you want to run away, made you hide in your room, made you long for a reason to get out of the house, because sin separates. Your best friend in high school broke your trust. You thought you could tell her anything, so you did. But one day, desperate for attention from someone she admired, your friend betrayed you. And what did her sin do? Made you want to avoid her locker, made you find a new place to sit at lunch, made you look for a new ride home after school, because sin separates. You got into it with someone at church. A meeting of Christian men got rather unchristian. Love got lost in a battle of strong wills. And what did all that sin do? Made you want the meeting to end, made him avoid the next Sunday handshake, made you think about finding a new church or give up on going to church altogether, because sin separates. Paul, the guy who gushed about God's bottomless love, wrote this to the Christians in Rome: "The wages of sin is death." Romans chapter 6, verse 23. What do you get for your sin is death. What happens when you don't love is that you don't get to be with the God of love. He is too good to be in the presence of that. He is ashamed of sin. He doesn't belong around it. This was never God's original plan. When He created us, He made us morally perfect, which allowed us to live in His presence. People could walk with God because they were much like God. However, things fell apart when some Christians call the fall, the moment when sin entered the world and our resemblance to God was shattered like a broken mirror. Like it or not, you and I entered this story post-fall, in a world that is stuffed with the sin that separates us from God and from one another. You might be pushing back on that claim because you don't feel like you deserve to be judged so harshly. But the truth is that you do deserve it. You and I deserve to be held accountable for the bad things we have done, regardless of how many good things we may often do. Imagine you are sitting in court with the man who killed your best friend in a tragic drunk driving accident. After a few birthday shots, this man got behind the wheel, drifted over the yellow line, and left your best friend's mother to grieve for the rest of her life. But the defendant's lawyer stands up and tries to reason with the judge. Your Honor, my client is a good man. He has spent 53 years on this earth and has only driven while intoxicated on one occasion, one single night. That means that since his 16th birthday, he has driven sober 13,504 days and driven drunk just once. By my math, he has been a good driver 99.99% of his life. And Your Honor, my client has never once robbed a bank or abused a child or committed a hate crime. He has kept 99% of this nation's laws 100% of the time. Therefore, I believe it is obvious he is a good person who does not deserve to be punished in any way. How would you feel about that defense? I bet you would be furious, because you're not looking for percentages or averages. You're looking for justice. You care about the one night, the one choice, the one sin that separated your friend from his family. Get my point? God is not concerned about your moral batting average. As a God of constant love, he can't stand it when people aren't loved, even once. This is the obvious problem that most people would rather not think about, but I hope you do. All of us have a court date coming with God. So what will we say to him? How will we defend ourselves? How will we dare to claim that we deserve to go to a better place? How, in this life, will we possibly believe that a pure God of love is with us? I realize these are disturbing questions to think about seriously. You might even be regretting the fact that you picked up this book. But the Christian faith, once the sobering news about sin has set in, offers what no one else in the universe does: an answer. A way for people like us to get back into the presence of God now and forever. That's what Jesus is all about.